Hey, what's up? So this video is going to be me changing my ignition system on my 2006 Ural from the Type 5 ignition to the updated Ducati ignition. Originally, I'm doing this because I believe my ignition system failed. Unfortunately, I can't test it because I have yet to find testing specifications for the coil itself. I believe, at least as far as signal to the coil, I'm getting everything. But I had to do testing on a side of the road, and having looked for specifications, I couldn't find any, so I gave up and was like, well, I'm going to have to buy a new ignition system. I might as well get the upgraded one. So here we are. First thing I'm going to do, which I have yet to actually look for specifications for this, but assuming that there aren't any, went ahead and tested the primary and secondary coil resistance. So what I have here, primary, is across the black and white leads for power and ground in, or power and signal in, and I have 0.8 ohms for primary resistance, and then secondary resistance is going to be boot to boot, and for that I have 12.59 kilo ohms. So that's where I'm starting from. I'm going to write this down in my manual along with the part number stamped on it, and I'm going to go start tearing this bike apart. Before I go, I should actually note that I'm going boot to boot rather than post to post because these are integral. You cannot remove the wire and test the actual post, or at least I'm having pulled the insulator rubber off here, it looks like it's non-replaceable, and I'm not really wanting to destroy this at this time. So I understand that going boot to boot, you're going to have the added resistance of your wires, but that's kind of going to be the name of the game. I do believe these are non-resistor wires. If I recall, the spark plugs for the newer version is delineated with an R, or rather denoted with an R, which would be resistance spark plug. So again, boot to boot because there are no posts. All right, I'm gonna get started. First thing, obviously, seat. Thought I'd put this down in the little corner of the video you're watching now of me pulling the tank off and getting ready to start working on that. So originally what happened was I was riding to work in the winter. Got to work, no problem. Well, actually, I take that back. On my way to work, I was experiencing some fairly constant misfiring. I had just filled up with gas, so I had suspected it was bad gas. And then the following night, when I went to leave to go home, I was unable to start the bike. And I started jumping into the ignition side first because while at work I sprayed it down with water to get the salt and crap off of it, so I was assuming in my head maybe I got water in it. Wound up being not getting any spark at the spark plug, so changed the spark plug, fired up, got home, no problem. Next day next day when I jumped on the highway, I made it like, I don't know, maybe 5 miles away from the house and just dead. On the side of the road, I'd pull the plug out, check for spark, would get spark, wouldn't get spark, you know, on and off. I'd keep the boot off or whatever. If I pulled, and when I put a new spark plug in and put the old plug in the wire and grounded the old plug with the wire in it, it wouldn't fire off. But if I took the plug out and grounded the plug with, grounded the plug to the bike, it would actually fire on one cylinder and run as well as it would on one cylinder, which I thought was odd. But looking at that spark plug, looked kind of like weak spark, whatnot. That's kind of when I gave up. This is the original spark plug that I took out on the evening the first time I had an issue, and I ran it through my spark tester, this guy here, and this actually does produce spark. You know, it's subjective whether or not it's enough, but so I was getting some spark. I don't really know. It's hard to tell, you know, how much is good enough, because just because you can see it doesn't mean you're getting good enough current. But that's kind of what was going on.
Roughly 2,000
with that.
RPMs.
I did give myself a couple healthy shocks while on the side of the road dicking with everything, so that was fun. But the little red light on the Type 5, the disc, it would, you know, flash correctly, so I assume the signal was correct.
6,000.
But I will test the coil when I take it, or the Type 5 coil off when I get it off, just to kind of see what's going on. But I don't know if anyone's interested to see this. All right, I had to pull the tank off camera because there was still some gas in it. But yeah, once you get the two bolts off, gas drained, the under the wishbone line undone, just pops right off. So next thing we're going to do is get into the Type 5 ignition and start pulling that off. Okay, so the first thing, I'm going to go ahead and pull off the puck, and then I'll get the cover plate off. The puck, I think, is 12 millimeter bolt, and then the puck, or rather the cover, I believe, is a 5 mil. But we'll get that stuff off, and we'll move along to it. This green wire is going up to my aftermarket tachometer. I don't know if I'll be able to retain that. Removing the coil. Coil's on there by two flathead screws. Two screws on the coil here and here. Those are the flatheads. I'm going to try and get the stator off of here. Alright. Those flathead screws here and here. It's 10 millimeter. More flathead screws here. There's all that. I believe this has to come out. This plate here for some new pieces. I'm going to get into the box and take a look at that. Okay, yeah, there's a new that. New oil seal. Yep, okay. Got two big spacers here. New mounting bracket. Not sure where that's supposed to go. Oh, that looks like for the CDI module. Yep. I believe these are for the coil. That's going to be for the pickup. Yep. Okay. That's going to be the little doodad that spins to fire it off. We'll run through the pickup. I got an old paper gasket that goes behind this. Okay. A real thick washer. Two spring washers. Okay, those probably go on these big spacers here. Okay. Best part is I didn't get any instructions, so I have no idea what's supposed to go where. Just gonna take a couple educated guesses, I guess. Well, that's interesting. This doesn't actually stick on there. So let's probably stack up builds, yep. Oh man, not a fan of what's going on here. This looks funky. So that could come off and go spinning into nowhere. So we're gonna move on. I'll start taking this guy off. Alright, so as it comes off, the back side's got this deep deal there. So that's going to correspond with that deep guy there. And then the seal. Gonna have to take a socket and tap this seal down. 7/8 it is. That was pretty easy. Paper gasket. I'm going to screw that back on. Of course, now you're on potato vision. So I'm not going to tighten those down all the way because these are going to have to get put somewhere around here. But what I'm going to do is crank the bike over to top dead center. just to kind of line stuff up. So I took out the spark plug. We put my finger over the hole on the left side jug, and I'm going to work the kickstart until I feel compression. Okay, I'll look down in the hole, get my timing marks. Well, got them. Both of them kind of in the picture there, so we're just going to go with that. Like I said, I'm just doing it to get stuff lined up. I'm going to put my original little stud on there. So the kit came with these two spacers, this rotor, two spring washers, and a couple extra bolts. I'm not going to use those. I'm pretty sure those are for a different model or a different setup.
So this is kind of where things went off the rails. Where I show, nope, don't do that. At least not with this version. What you see is the original rotor that I took off of my bike. It's the original for the Type 5. I thought that that's what you would use. However, I was incorrect. There is a different version of the Ducati ignition, which would be the first gen, I guess, that had a replacement one-piece rotor that was slightly shorter than the Type 5 one. And however, that's not what I got. So where you see nope, don't do that.
The first piece of hardware I'm going to do is going to be the coil. It's going to get mounted on this support arm here. Unfortunately, I'm not really going to be able to get you in a good position to actually see what I'm doing, but essentially the coil's supposed to sit right there. The kit came with these two 90-degree brackets. I'm pretty much just going to get screwed in on either side. I'm going to drill and use some screws. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that in video just due to the location of it. But like I said, two 90-degree mounts, and then screw the coil into those mounts using these holes here and here.
So jumping back in, I had to supply my own hardware for the bolt that goes through that portion of the frame, and then the two screws that hold the coil up onto those 90-degree brackets. Did not come in the kit. So if that's how you're going to do it, be prepared to supply some hardware.
Okay, the next piece of hardware is the CDI module mount. And I'm kind of jamming it in here, but I've set the module in this mount like this, and I'll be bolting it through this bolt that was already drilled. I did have to get a longer bolt and a lock washer, but it'll be underneath this plate here where the seat sits, like this. Next up will be the wire. Obviously, this will plug in to the CDI module here. I'll run the length of the wire underneath the backbone here. This blue one gets grounded. This single yellow pin goes to this connector that the Type 5 single connector went to. There's a brown and a red and black, or 12 volts to the CDI module and ground to the CDI module. This 2-pin goes to the coil, and then the 3-pin goes to the Hall effect sensor. One thing I am going to do is modify this connector because I want to plug my tachometer into it, and that'll be in the green wire. So I'll be connecting this green wire that I already have and be connecting it to this. I'm going to do that by de-pinning and doing a new pin. All right, I just buttoned up the wiring harness. There's in the CDI module. I have it going underneath here. A couple zip ties. There's the power connection. The Hall effect connection and the coil. All right, so we got the wiring harness all buttoned up. I'm going to put the tank back on, and then I'll hook up my timing light, and we'll get to start testing this thing. One thing I didn't mention is the spark plugs themselves need that little bulb end on it. So if you're going to do this conversion, you should get the proper spark plugs. I'll put the description of that here, but it's the R or resistor style spark plug. I'm going to run without them for now. It doesn't hurt anything. It just creates RF interference with like a radio. I have a radio, so I will get those resistor spark plugs. But until then, I'm just going to put the little bulbs on the end of the spark plug so the new boots will seat. But for right now, got to get that tank on. Something I should mention is getting a dry brake for this would be a smart idea. So if you're going to be in here dicking with this gas tank, like at all, you should invest in a dry brake. Highly recommended. I think I will do that. All right. Tank's on. Takes too long. Okay, so I wasn't getting any spark. I think the issue is you're not supposed to use the rotor, which just disappeared. You're not supposed to use this rotor, and that you are supposed to use this ridiculous stack up with this flat one. So working on that theory, I've changed the orientation of the sensor. So as it sits on there, that flat rotor will go in between here. Focus. And I think to add to that theory, the back side of this rotor got chewed up on the ring here. So this is why instructions in the kit would have been really nice, but you know, $500 they decide not to give you instructions, which is why I'm making this video. So Um, you won't have seen this in the video, but I had previously installed all this stuff differently. For now, I'm gonna bring the motor back to the timing mark on number 1, and I will adjust that wheel with this spring stack up and try and get stuff figured out. All right, after some more pain in the butt, I decided that the wires need to come out through this U shape, so I had to flip this over 180 degrees. Originally had the wires on top, now they're down here coming out of this little T-cut. It came with those 2 spring washers. They're different thicknesses. I had to put both of them back here, and I also saw that these larger spacers are slightly different size. So for mine, I needed both of those spacers, and I needed these larger ones in the correct orientation to get the disc to have proper spacing inside the Hall effect or the rotor. Now I'm at my timing mark, and I'm gonna set this in perfect line, and then as I run the timing gun, I'll adjust this back and forth. The thing I really do not like about all this is even when this is tightened down, it still has the capacity of spinning around the shaft. There's no actual fixment like the original rotor at least had these little steps in the, come on, had these steps in here that would engage on this shaft. But this is, it seems like a step back. So I'm not a huge fan here, but I need to get this bike running. So I'm going to tighten this down. And like I said, I'll use this to adjust, and hopefully we'll get it running. Okay, so I'm ready to start my getting this thing timed in. I'm not really going to be able to get the camera down there, so I'm going to have to go off the whiteboard here. When you pop off that little rubber cover and you bring your bike to top dead center, like we discussed, using the left cylinder, just putting your finger over the hole, working the kickstart until you feel compression, and then slowly watching. These 2 lines will come up into that window. The first line will be the top dead center line. It's going to be just an arrow. And then your timing mark will be the arrow with a dot or a circle or whatever. And then on the case itself, you should have a stamped line or some kind of indicator of where the center of this hole is. And you want to line up either line with that dash. So if you want top dead center, you want your top dead center. Again, no little circle. You'd have that in line with this stamping. For your timing light, or your timing mark rather, you would want this line, the arrow with the circle, in line with that stamping. Now when the bike's running at idle, your timing light will be in line with that stamping. So that's going to be roughly 800 to 1,000 RPMs. And then your other one will be kind of floating right here. But this will be your at idle timing. So when you fire it all up and you're using your timing light, you want to adjust that little saddle until you're reading just like this. Now when you go to double check your advance, the ural is 1800 degrees advanced, or sorry, 18 degrees advanced at 18 degrees advanced at 3000 RPMs. So you'll have to adjust your timing gun. If you have an adjust function or an advanced function, you'll adjust that to 18, whether that's a dial or buttons. Mine has buttons. Then you'll start the bike, bring up the RPMs to 3000, And then when you shoot it, this should be in line because you'll be 18 degrees advance, and that'll show in line with that mark and your timing number. I wish I could show you this on the bike, but I really can't get the camera down in there. But to reiterate, at idle, the timing light, the arrow with the dot, with 0 advance on your timing gun will show in line with the stamping on the case. And at 3,000 RPMs, your timing light and your gun advanced 18 degrees, you'll show the timing light in line with the stamping. But you have to dial in that 18 degrees when you're over 3,000 RPMs. The actual number might be less than 3,000, but I'm not exactly sure where the top of the curve is, so 3,000 is kind of where I'm going to go with it. The big number is getting this idle, and then you can fine tune it on the advance as you wish. But as long as you're 0 degrees advance on your gun, timing mark, stamping, 800 to 1,000 RPMs, you should be good. So we're gonna wheel it out into the driveway there and see how it goes. All right, I'm done pulling out my hair over this thing. I got it running and I got it timed. Unfortunately, none of it was on video because I've been at it for the last 2 hours adjusting not just the mount for the Hall effect sensor, but also that little flat rotor, because it's 2 points of adjustment and it creates way too many variables. That's why I liked the fixed rotor. And apparently what I have is the newest version of the Ducati ignition. There was an older Ducati ignition version that had a replacement fixed rotor. So somewhere someone decided this was a upgrade to swap out to this fixed rotor, or to this flat rotor, which is pretty much adjustable. It doesn't make a lick of sense to me, but I'm not Ivan. At any rate, what I had to do was, once I got the thing running and close enough to timing, I had the adjustment for the Hall effect sensor all the way down in one position. So I just moved both the rotor and the Hall effect up at the same time, and then fired it back up, and I was able to bring the Hall effect down to get it right where I want it. I have it, the timing mark, centered at idle, and I have it set at that 18 degrees above my 3,000, or at my 3,000. So I'm happy. I'm going to button everything up and then get this thing back on the road. So it's been an interesting install. I'm going to be calling where I bought the kit from and kind of giving them a bitch fit about why they didn't include instructions. But at any rate, I'm going to flip this around, show you the final install, so you can get a better idea. Maybe. There we go. It's not at. I don't have the motor turned over to the top dead center or the timing mark. This is just as it's set when I turned it off. If I can get you in here. There we go. I did have an issue with the flat rotor touching the Hall effect sensor. So not only do I have those 2 thin spacers all the way back, but I measured these 2 larger spacers and found the largest one and put it in back, and it's giving me, I don't know, a paper's worth of space between the back side of the Hall effect and the back side of the rotor. So there's air gap there now. But everything's tightened down. I'm going to not use lock thread. I'm hoping that's not going to bite me in the butt, but we'll see. Something interesting is I do get air coming out of here. So I don't know if I should fill these holes up with some screws. The kit only came with 2 screws and I see 3 holes. Maybe, I don't know. We'll figure it out. At any rate, this install is done for now.
Looks like my camera's doing weird things. So I'm just going to kind of recap the video here, add a couple things in. So I had called the dealer that I bought the kit from. Um, well, I emailed them and complaining about not getting instructions. They said it was a mistake. Instructions that came. They emailed them to me. The ones that came were for the older Ducati ignition, which wouldn't be correct for what I purchased. And I was like, hey, you guys need to figure this out. So I don't know if they're going to wind up fixing that or not. Hopefully they do. The big differences between the Ducati first version and the new one that's for sale, the Ducati second ignition, is that flat disc. So the first version had a replacement one-piece rotor that would index on the shaft, and the Hall effect sensor mount kind of wrapped around in sort of a U shape. And then the newest version, or at least the one that I have and the one I installed, you're supposed to use that flat disc. So I made the mistake of trying to install the kit using my original rotor. Didn't work. So I wound up going with the flat disc, as you see. So I just kind of want to get that info out there. Anyway, hope this helps. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.